Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Blue Feather Stories. I'm your host, Blue Thunderbird Woman, also known as Carol. Wow, it has been some time since I've been in this shared sacred space with all of you. And thank you so much for sticking with me. I know that I don't record these podcasts on a regular basis, not because I don't have a lack of topics to talk about, but really, life has been super busy, and this is one of those things that is always on the list to do, but don't always get to it. So today I want to talk to you about a really exciting topic, and it is my journey, my introduction to Reiki. I think as it stands now, Reiki has become quite a common known energy therapy, which is fantastic, awesome. When I started my journey 20 some odd years ago, not too many people knew what Reiki was. But I really want to spend some time today sort of sharing with you my story around how it came into my life and at what point did it come into my life, and then what part does it play today. So I'd sort of like to take you through the whole cycle of Reiki. If you don't mind joining me on this story, that would be great. So go get yourself a cup of tea and grab a seat. Put your headphones on and let's dive in, shall we? So I have to take you back to my mid-20s. I had my first experience with Reiki. I had just left a very abusive relationship and was living on my own. And my mother decided that it would be a really good idea to treat me to some self-care. So she made an appointment with a little tiny spa just around the corner from where I lived. And I was to go in for a pedicure. On the day of our appointment, for whatever reason, I could not have my pedicure. But there was a gentleman there who was available for something called reflexology. Now, you got to remember, this is 25 some odd years ago, and although reflexology has been around for a long time, I certainly knew nothing about it at that point in time in my life. And so I agreed to have a reflexology treatment, and it was very relaxing, was all very good. And towards the end of the session, the gentleman asked me if I would like to receive some Reiki. I asked him what that was. Whatever explanation he gave me at the time, I was satisfied with. And I said, yes, by all means, go ahead. And then the next thing that happened was a true miracle for me, because for the first time in months, I actually relaxed. Now, I know you're thinking, well, what's the big deal about relaxing? But here's the thing. When you've just spent the last year of your life not knowing whether or not that would be the last day of your life because you're in a volatile, very abusive, mental abusive, and physically abusive relationship, you're pretty much stuck in fight or flight mode every moment of every day, even while you're sleeping. So becoming relaxed for me was a huge, huge deal. And I had experienced that for the first time with this 10-minute Reiki session at the end of my reflexology treatment. So that's how I got introduced to Reiki. Then years would pass, And nothing much more happened after that, really. A couple of years have gone by, never really thought about it again. Life went on, busy on my healing journey, or the beginning of my healing journey. And I had landed a job at a big, large corporation here in Winnipeg. And one of the perks is having a gym and having classes. And we had the privilege of having this wonderful woman by the name of Deborah Smith who taught yoga. And so I registered for yoga, and that was the beginning of my yoga journey. But Deborah, after a few weeks of being in class, was offering a class called Reiki Level I. And I all of a sudden remembered that time that I had received my reflexology treatment with this little Reiki 10-minute session afterwards, and how relaxed I was. And I was curious. So I asked her lots of questions. And at this point in my healing journey, I really, truly understood at a deep knowing level that there had to be more to healing than what the Western medical was offering me, which at that point was antidepressants, sleeping pills, and relaxation pills. None of those felt good in my body, and I knew that there had to be another way. So after checking in with Deborah, I decided to save up my money and take this course. And that was my intro. How it even came into my awareness was this episode, this session I had with this man way 25, almost 30 years ago now. And I want to talk a little bit about the why before I get into the actual training. The why for me is that I really, at that point in time in my life, felt broken. I was broken. I had what I now understand had experienced soul loss. I understand now today that these were stages of karmic stages being set up for me to learn some really important lessons in life. And although I get that today, I certainly didn't get any of that back then. And so I pause here and I ask you the question, what's your why? What's your why in life? What feels broken? What feels disconnected? What have you embodied in pain in your body? Where does it feel uncomfortable? Where does it hurt? Where have you embodied in your emotional body emotional pain? Where have you suffered from spiritual pain? We all come to Earth to experience some amazing things. And I just want to ask you, what's your why? So for me, back then, my why was really to feel relaxation, to really sort of take control of a broken me and put myself back together like I would Humpty Dumpty. One piece at a time, I would put myself back together. And so that was really the beginning of my journey of what I would call holistic health. And it was an amazing beginning. And I encourage anyone who's listening who can relate to any of what I'm saying, if you want to heal, you need to empower yourself first, right? We need to learn the tools that we can apply ourselves for our own healing journey. Yeah. So I signed up for level 1, and I remember that class that there was at least 8 or 9 students within the class, and we were all at the teacher's apartment. And she began teaching us the theory behind what Dr. Usui had created or that he had really studied. And I remember learning for the first time that I was more than my physical body. Like, that was a wah for me to know that I was more than my body that I could touch. I had no concept that I had an emotional, a mental, a spiritual body. I had no idea that even existed. I had never heard of chakras before, energy centers. All of this was new to me. And so for me, that whole experience, that whole class was a mind-blowing class, if you will. And one of the exercises that we needed to do is we had to play with energy. We had to sort of really prove to ourselves that we were more than our physical bodies. So what we would do is we would rub our palms of our hands together, like creating friction between the hands. And then we would take the hands apart slowly and sort of feel this ball of energy between our palms of our hands. And then we would play with it and move our hands in different directions and sort of feel where we would lose that contact with that energy ball. And that was the first time I had ever experienced that. And it was wild and crazy for me back then. And then our teacher had us partnered up with someone where we had to be cognizant of our own energetic field, and the other person that was our partner would come and walk into our field. And we would have to let that other person know when we could feel or sense them or imagine them. Like, our eyes were closed, like we couldn't see, and we would just be going on feeling. And so the teacher had asked me to be her demonstration person. And so I was at the other end of the hallway in her apartment, and she was way at the other end. And the students were like, okay, now pay attention and let's see where Carol can feel me. And as I sat there with my eyes closed and my back to her, she slowly started to move towards me without making a sound. And I don't think she had taken her first step, and I felt her. I could feel her energetic body. And she said to me, okay, you need to turn around and look. So I did. I thought she was right beside me, like a foot in front of me or back of me, but she wasn't. She had barely even taken a step, way at the other end of the hallway. And so she was explaining to the class that I was extremely sensitive, that if I could sense her from all the way over there, I was extremely sensitive, that I could feel other people's energies from 20 feet away. And I don't know about you, but to learn that was another aha moment. Because to recognize that you are sensitive and that you can feel a lot then starts to answer questions about your life and about how sensitive you have been through your whole life and how that would have a huge impact on how you interact with other people. So when I learned that I was that sensitive, I came to realize why, as a young adolescent, that I made the choices that I made when it came to what I put into my body. I finally understood that I could feel other people's energies, which meant that if they were angry, sad, happy, upset, anxious, whatever they were feeling, I could feel too. That also meant that I did not know the difference between my own energetic body and the influence of someone else's energetic body. And when I reflect on my adolescence, I chose to indulge in many substance abuses, alcohol being a big one, and lots of drugs, lots of marijuana, hashish, and I even went through a stage of doing a lot of cocaine in my life. And I came to realize that I did those things because I was unconsciously numbing out everyone else's pain that I could feel around me. I did not know how to discern back in those days at all. I didn't even know it existed. So Reiki Level 1 for me was a massive self-discovery of the very beautiful, sensitive being that I was. And I'm so grateful for it. Now, after I did Level 1, I went through a bit of a body detox. I remember back in those days that I quit drugs and I quit drinking alcohol for a long time. I started to make better choices in my food choices. And I started to also notice that certain people needed to move on and outside of my circle of friendship. I was changing. I was healing. And although that could be really uncomfortable and confusing, it was necessary. And it certainly has played a huge part of who I am, what my magic is, and what I am here to offer today. So that was Level 1. New paragraph. About 30 days later, I chose to continue my studies in Reiki, and I took Level 2. I will say that I never ever had the intention of taking any of these Reiki classes for the sake of healing others or bringing that healing energy to others. It truly was an inward journey for me of my own self-healing. So by the time I had come to take Level 2, I had already been practicing my self-healing every day. I didn't miss a day. And in Level 2, we learned to start working with some sacred symbols and then bringing in that energy of those sacred symbols to really start working on the level of the emotion, the mind, and the spiritual body. That level, receiving that attunement and continuing my self-practice every day, I then went through something. So in Level 2, we started to work on healing the emotional, the mind, and the spiritual body. And I had no idea how that would affect me. How that also really changed my life. And at the time, I was still working in my corporate job, and I found myself going through a second deep depression. The difference with the second depression was that I knew that I was not suicidal. I just simply felt this deep sort of dark night of the soul, if you will, but it lasted for a couple of months. I always understood or had the knowing that it was because of this level 2 training that I had received. So fortunately for me, I had enough mindset to be gentle with myself, to give myself the time that I needed to process and work through the detoxification that was happening for me on a physical, mental level. And in level 2, I also learned how to do distant healing, which was a concept that I could barely grasp my mind around. How can you heal or bring healing to someone who's not physically present? None of that made any sense to me at the time. But today I completely understand, because if you study any quantum physics, you understand that we are just a bunch of energy particles floating together in a mass expression of the human body. But back then, I had no idea of all this stuff. And so it was all new information and hard for me to grasp those concepts. After level 2, I continued my self-healing journey for many, many months. Every day, every night when I went to bed, I would do self-healing. And every once in a while, I would reach out to someone who could help me, because sometimes we need that external help. And it was a good 10, 12 years before I felt I was ready to continue my training in Reiki. I had come to a point in my life where I was experiencing for the first time a non-judgmental way of being. I guess the best way I could really describe that is that finding that when I listened or read stories of atrocities or horrible incidences that were happening in the world, I had no emotional reaction to any of them. My thought process had really shifted from victimization to understanding that all beings, whether perpetrator or victim, is really just a being having an experience. And when you understand that at a spiritual level, then all of the judgments start to drop. This is when I knew that I was ready to continue my studies in Reiki. Still, at this point, I still had no interest in performing Reiki treatments for other people for healing. I had absolutely no interest in that at all. It was still really all for me and to gain the knowledge. After my Reiki Level 3 in my advanced class, my level of clairs, so we have clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairknowing, clairsentient, all of those clairs. After that level 3 attunement, all of my clairs opened right up. That was mind-blowing for me, to understand that I could see spirit, I could talk to spirit, I could hear spirit. Wow. Wow. Yeah. That was the opening for me in level 3. After a few months of taking in the information, the wisdom, I was already running a wellness bed and breakfast, and I decided to go ahead and offer Reiki treatments to my guests. And that, my friends, was the training ground for so much that came in. It was my training ground to know and trust my guides. It was my training ground to observe people's dis-ease. It was an incredible opportunity to hone my craft. New paragraph. So here I am today. I've been a Reiki master now for 13, 14 years. I'll say 15 years, at least, practicing Reiki as a modality of energy healing with clients. My curiosity has led me to mastering in integrated energy therapy and training as a shaman. Who would know that receiving a reflexology treatment with a little Reiki session at the end 25 some odd years ago would lead me to this today. I've been wanting to share this story with all of you for some time. I'm excited to finally sharing it. I hope that you get something out of it. You know, if you're sitting on the fence on whether you're kind of curious about Reiki, if you're working through any kind of dis-ease or mental illness of some sort, I can tell you that this will help. It helps in many ways, knowing how to do it, but also knowing and empowering yourself that you can heal yourself. New paragraph. So I'm super excited to share with you today that I'm finally, Spirit's been moving me for a couple of years now to get all of my Reiki teachings online. I knew that one day things would go digital. My stopping block or my blockage was always, well, how do I give an attunement when I'm not physically present with the student? And that answer has been revealed to me through light language. So I'm super excited to share with you that I've completed inputting, recording, doing everything, demonstration videos for a Reiki home study program. So if this is something that interests you, I will put the link to the website where you can read more info on it. And go ahead and sign up, study at your own pace, and come join the world of healers, whether it's your own healing journey or that you want to help others on their journeys. Aho, merci, miigwech, namaste. Thank you so, so much for joining me today. Have an amazing, amazing week. Loving you, Carol.